Welcome to the Sustainable Cleveland 2021 Virtual Summit. My name is Patty. I'll be lurking here in the background. If you have any technical issues, Hopin is web-based. Sometimes it's as easy a fix as refreshing your browser. I hope you had a good break, and what a way to kick off the afternoon. This is going to be a great session. This is Air Quality in Cleveland, a panel discussion. And joining us today, we have Christina Yoka, Director or Chief of Air Pollution Outreach, Cleveland Department of Public Health. Divya Sridhar, Manager of Climate Resiliency and Sustainability with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. And Whitney Long-Jones, Director of Community Engagement with Ohio City Incorporated. With that, I will turn it over to the ladies. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Sustainable Cleveland and the Office of Sustainability for having us here today. My name is Divya Sridhar. As Patty mentioned, I'm the Manager of Climate Resiliency and Sustainability at Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. Cleveland Neighborhood Progress is a nonprofit intermediary. Bear with me as I pull up my slides for the discussion now. I hope everybody can see the slides here. So I'm here on behalf of Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. The work that we do, we sit as an intermediary working with municipal and other bodies that develop programs and policies, and also work closely with the community through our anchor partners, community development corporations, and some other strategic partnerships that we've built along the way. Our vision, I'm not going to read out our vision and mission, but it is to really help residents of Cleveland thrive where they are. That means having quality of life is important. Cleveland Neighborhood Progress has been around for over 30 years now, and over the years we've worked on several placemaking projects. Over the last years, our placemaking work has become a little bit more has had some strategic focus when it started to look at land issues through the Reimagining a More Sustainable Cleveland project, where we had the opportunity to explore land through the lens of community and seeing if community had a way to look at it. What would that look like? That looked like several art projects, community resilience projects in the form of community gardens, tree planting projects, and other things along the way, which brought us to working a little more closely on a segue into climate resiliency when we received funding from Kresge Foundation to begin to think about how the work that we did on land impacts climate resiliency as we move forward. Through this project, we learned a lot. It was timely because the Cleveland was at that time had just had its climate action plan, and some of the policies and outcomes that came here sort of aligned with them, helping them sort of mutually benefit each other. City of Cleveland's along with City of Cleveland's climate action plan. For this project, we worked in four neighborhoods with four climate ambassadors in each of these neighborhoods to understand what community really wanted to see, what was going on in their community. Climate ambassadors here were almost like a conduit, bringing information from the community, seeing what they were, and informing what it could look like, and having an opportunity to go back and implement, design some programs that they could that would benefit their community. One of the constant things that and I preface this I preface this with all this information so you know that the reason Cleveland Neighborhood Progress started to think about air quality was that it came from the community, with several of our ambassadors coming back to talk to us about how air quality was impacting their health. We all know that Cleveland at this point ranks number 10 by the American Lung Association as one of the top polluted cities for air. Christina here from the City Department of Public Health can sort of correct me if I slip on any other facts, but we still are a city that has air quality issues. Working with the ambassadors was our opportunity to understand how we might work with the city to understand Cleveland's air and partner with them on how we can learn more both about Cleveland's air and take to the city what the residents are hearing. So the year following, we tried to pursue a project based on our ambassadors' input. We learned that several communities in Cleveland had high asthma levels. Some of these communities were also those communities that had and these are, several of them are environmental justice communities. If you look at the red spots, which we're these days trying to avoid putting red there because it's a harsh color. Anyway, but the idea, you can see that the Cleveland Sea, anything's distressing, you're beginning to see that. You see that because of historic disinvestment in those communities. You see that air quality is high in those communities. Following, I will show you a couple other maps that align with this kind of pattern. But this really began to show us that we needed to pay attention to what health look like, what does health management look like as we move forward, and how does this sort of impact the way we think about policies as we look at development or as we look at new projects, new planning processes that move forward. Our hope was to work with the city to understand that a little bit more. So we have the opportunity to begin those conversations with the city. This is just to understand that we are at a stage where we are, data is key. Data democracy is important for us as we begin to understand how these relationships pan out. You can look at how healthcare costs look different across different blocks here. We wanted to begin to understand why that looked different. What are some of those land use patterns, adjacencies, or traffic patterns here that influence the difference in healthcare costs? So again, we begin to talk about this. The reason air quality is important, asthma is important, understanding this is important, is the city has several plans right now as we work in partnerships towards building a better tree canopy, as we address how we are doing our energy utility and other things. It's important for us to understand those cumulative impacts that we begin to have. Someone who has a respiratory problem, asthma, on a poor air quality day, may be asked to stay indoors, turn on the air conditioning. But if we begin to start making these kinds of recommendations that are extremely important for us to manage health, we need to understand where our utility burdens lie as well. Who is able to turn on the AC, who is not able to turn on the AC. So we have to begin to understand what kinds of policies and programs have to come localized. And for that, we need to understand how the air quality looks like in those specific places. What are those specific actions happening? What are those real new projects that could be triggers? It could be a new corridor coming in place. It could be a new ramp that's being built. It could be a problem entity that has been there for a long time. It could have been a restaurant that's having a problem with grease burning that's causing air pollution, or it's causing, in some places it might be ample idling that's causing air pollution. So we needed to begin to map out some of these relationships in order for us to understand what the community could benefit from, so that not only we are seeing this, but the community is in partnership. We're hearing from them and they're able to co-design some of these things. Again, when we reached out to the city has been we've been working with the city for about 2 years now in trying to make a plan to deploy 2 kinds of air quality monitors that Christina can talk about in her next, in the presentation following. But the idea of using these air quality monitors and community monitoring process is so that there is participatory research and science-based approaches that we can use for problem solving. And we are also truth testing some of the information that we get to improve our monitoring a little bit more. Ultimately, anything that we learn here is going to impact how we create policy and how we implement some of those things. Again, the more important thing here is to understand, are we implementing the right things in the right place? Are we making sure that we're transitioning to potentially EV vehicles, so we are not idling so much, making sure our transit lines are better, our children have better access to, there are better school routes, school bus routes designed. Or is there an opportunity for us to think about when there is a high asthma day, there is a high spike, is there an opportunity for us to do health management in the form of making sure schools are equipped with their nurses who understand there's going to be a high volume? Can we change the alerting system here so that people know ahead of time to carry their inhaler or to use the nebulizer? Again, the school knows how to handle this group. So community air monitoring really puts more, is more of a public health approach. And we wanted to see how we use this public health approach as we sort of begin to think about planning as well. Again, form of buildings, shape of buildings, pathways, transit plans, all these things, as we begin to collect more granular data, how does that allow us to use this data better? So again, in 2019, the Office of Sustainability, Christina Yoka from the Department of Air, a previous council person, one from a member from a CDC, several of us were able to travel to Newark to understand what they had done to address some of these issues, trying to really go through a list of environmental burdens that their communities had, and to use data-informed policies that would then repair some of those things. We learned as we sort of did this that there were several cities across the country who had developed several forms of ordinances. For example, California, and a lot of those were, again, very informed processes. Just to take the example of California, California has a robust air monitoring network across their entire state. They have several community monitoring programs, and they use this to, again, allow their residents, their communities, to get information on their alerting systems, communities to help participate in programs that they can design. They then advocate for themselves with to the municipalities. So we think that having more data than less is always good. So working with the city has been great. And I am going to, at this point, share a little bit, just a snapshot, to say that working over the last couple of years, we have been able to now secure with the city, with the IoT collaborative, several air quality sensors and monitors. The city has 11 of those purple air quality monitors. We've been able to procure 50 additional sensors that will be distributed across the city, some of them in the county public libraries, to get an understanding of the airshed, some of them in the city public library network. And then Cleveland Neighborhood Progress is looking for community partners in some specific neighborhoods in Glenville, Kingsbury Run area, in the Harvard East 64th neighborhood, somewhere in the Euclid Greens area and the Metro Parks, to understand what, to place some of these sensors so we can understand some of these issues that we talked about. Some places may have a higher tree canopy and yet still have a bad air quality number. Some places may have, lesser density, but still poor air quality, lesser density and maybe more industrial use, poor air quality. So we're looking for a different, a good smattering of criteria as we look to cite some of these sensors. And we're hoping that with having this coverage here, we might be able to understand our airshed a little bit better, and our community can respond to some of these things. We can begin to think about ways to collect this data, put this data into the hands of community residents, and so that they can advocate for themselves. And there is a sign-up form if you're interested, or if your community is interested in hosting one of these sensors, based on what you'll hear from Christina in the next presentation. With that, I'll pass this on to Christina to talk. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Divya. So good afternoon, everyone. As was Patty introduced in the beginning of the session, my name is Christina Yoka, and I am the Chief of Air Pollution Outreach for the Cleveland Department of Public Health, the Division of Air Quality. The Cleveland Department of Public Health, we are your local health agency that serves the city of Cleveland. So as I am sure people can imagine, the past year and a half, we've been a little bit busy with COVID, but that's not the only thing that we do here. I am specifically within the Division of Air Quality. Patty, next slide, please. And the Division of Air Quality, we are what is called an EPA delegated local air agency. So what that means is that we're contracted with Ohio EPA to be the local authority on any stationary sources of air pollution. So this would be any type of facility, any industry, anything along those lines that have any level of air pollution. We're the agency that is responsible for making sure that they follow all of the local ordinances that the city of Cleveland has, the agency that's responsible to make sure that they follow all of the state rules, and we make sure that they follow all the federal rules, such as what is within the Clean Air Act. Next slide, please. And so we do that with 4 basic sections to our team. We have monitoring, enforcement, permitting, and outreach. Our monitoring team, they operate an ambient air monitoring network. So there are about 16 stations throughout Cuyahoga County that have different types of air monitors that are used to monitor for what are called the criteria air pollutants. So these are things like particulate matter, ozone, lead, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and carbon monoxide. So our monitors are run 365 days a year, every single day at different frequencies. We have enforcement staff that are responsible for going out into the field and conducting inspections of facilities. So they take a look at the rules and regulations to see if the facility that they are visiting that day is following what they're supposed to be doing. So there are rules for operations, there's rules for emission levels. So they go out and make sure that they're doing that. That team also responds to citizen complaints. So if you ever have an air quality concern in your neighborhood, you can call that phone number that is listed there. That's 216-664-7442 and submit an air quality complaint to our office, and our inspectors will go out and inspect it. And the types of complaints that we receive are everything from open burning to weird odors in a neighborhood to construction companies that might be dry cutting and causing a lot of dust or dragging dirt out onto the roadways. Those things are prohibited. So we will go out, and even if you're not quite sure if it's something that would fall within our regulation, you can always give us a call and we'll check it out anyways. We have permitting staff, and they receive permits from City of Cleveland facilities or Cuyahoga County facilities that will have some sort of air pollution device. So this could be anything from dry cleaners to gas stations to large facilities that you would be aware of. And they receive the applications, they write the permits, submit them to Ohio EPA, and then Ohio EPA issues the permit. And then we have our outreach team. We are the newest addition to the City of Cleveland Division of Air Quality. Our section was established in 2017. We really officially got started in 2018, and we're here to be that link with the community. We're here to develop educational information. We're here to go out to public health meetings. Our job is to make sure that we are hearing from the community about what are the concerns and helping to develop solutions for that. So wide range of activities under there, but you can always reach out to me if there's something that's going on in your community that you think that might benefit from the services. But what I'm going to focus on specifically today is what Divya started to mention, which are the air sensors. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what are air sensors and how do we use them and how is the City of Cleveland using them? I mean, the one project that Divya mentioned, but then also some education activities. Before I go into that, though, I just want to make a distinction here between air sensors and monitors. If you hear me refer to an air sensor, I'm referring to the devices that we're talking about today. So that'll be the purple air monitor, that'll be the Tetrahedra monitor. These are smaller in a class of instruments known as low-cost air quality sensors. And these are tools that are used in the community for the types of projects that Divya described. They're used for education. They're used to help us understand and establish patterns. But these air sensors are not regulatory instruments. If you hear me refer to a monitor, what I'm talking about is the equipment that we utilize at our monitoring sites. There is a difference in the technology that's being used between those different types of instruments. There's a difference in the quality assurance, which is the process for confirming that you have good data. There's differences in those. So there's a place for each one of these tools, but it's important to know the distinction between an air sensor and an air monitor, and then how we as a local air agency can make use of the sensors. For example, an air sensor might show what would be considered an exceedance, but that's not data that's going to go into the state's plan to determine if we're meeting the federal rules and regulations. But what it can do is help the city of Cleveland, the Cleveland Division of Air Quality, understand the community and help and develop solutions for what might be impacting that specific community. Next slide, please. So there are two very specific types of air sensors that we have focused the most on. Now, there are a lot of them out there on the market, and EPA has a good website where they have gone through and they have evaluated the various sensors that are available and the how reliable is the data, and looked at like what are some of the limitations to each one of these devices. But these are just the two that we've so far had the opportunity to work with. That doesn't mean that there are not other good ones that are out there. So specifically, we've worked with Tetrahedra air sensors and we've worked with Purple air sensors. Both of them are sensors for particulate matter, and they both pretty much use the same technology. The Purple air sensor is a little bit different because one sensor actually has two sensors within it, and then the Tetrahedra sensor just has one sensor in it. Next slide, please. So the project that Divya mentioned is the Tetrahedra Air Sensor Deployment Project. This was a project funded by US Ignite and the National Science Foundation. And they selected 3 cities across the country, Cleveland, Chattanooga, and Kansas City, to deploy 50 of these sensors. When the project first started, we were looking at 75, but then it was adjusted down to 50. But the point was to get these 50 air sensors out into the community so you can have a better understanding of the airshed. You can have a better understanding of how is pollution moving within that community. They also had to tie in specifically how COVID-19 case diagnoses might be related to particulate matter. There are studies that have been out there that show that in higher instances, when you're exposed to more particulate matter, the COVID-19 virus is able to basically hang on to that particulate. So if you're exposed to higher levels of particulate matter, you're likely, there's a higher chance of being exposed to COVID-19. So that was one of the reasons why this study through the US Ignite, they wanted to address COVID-19 in some capacity. So Divya and I are also working with the IoT Collaborative, Digital C, and a couple others like on getting these 50 air sensors deployed and out into the community. As she mentioned, we've utilized the Cleveland Public Library System, the Cuyahoga County Public Library System, and then also have the community ones that are available for use. As the local air agency, we've also co-located 2 of these monitors, 2 of these sensors with our EPA monitors. Next slide, please. Oh, I think there it is. Okay. So here's just kind of a snapshot of the type of data that we can get from these. At the top of the screen, you see 3 different charts that are all on the same time frame, where they're looking at particulate matter 2.5, temperature, and humidity. And so these are, the blue line is an average of all of the air sensors that are deployed within the city of Cleveland and what those readings were that day. So it's too hard to read like what the actual dates were, but it's about a week's worth of data. And this is an average of, I believe, about 30 sensors that were operational at that point in time. The other data that we can get from this is the graph down at the bottom, is that's every single air sensor that was operating at that specific point in time. So it's the same time-bound graph, but what you can see is the different air sensors and what their rates of particulate matter were at the same point in time. And then you can go even deeper into this data. You can look at it for the individual sensor. You can look at different time frames. So it's really a very good tool to use to kind of see what is happening within that community. Because as I said, we have our air monitors. There's 16 stations, but that's 16 stations throughout all of Cuyahoga County. So what this does is it kind of gives us a more granular look at the air quality that's within a certain community. Next slide, please. So in addition to that project that we're working with Divya, we've also been working on air sensors and utilizing them as a tool within schools to teach students and youth about what is air pollution, why should we care about it, and like what is it. So within the Division of Air Quality, we do now have two different services that we're offering. We're offering a short-term workshop and then also a longer project-based learning experience with the school that might want to spend, either a semester with us or spend the school year with us. So next slide, please. So our first really fun workshop is we have students build air sensors with Legos. We have done this with youth as young as 4th grade up to 11th grade. And they all have a blast doing it. Basically, we teach them about what is air pollution, why does it matter, give them the key component pieces to an air sensor, give them the tools, give them the material that they need, and then they just go at it and they build. And they have such a fun time doing it. It's a hard workshop. It's not easy. And it is very much based on like a STEM engineering type of workshop. But it's a way for us to start talking to the students and talking to them about what is air pollution. Now, this is something that we actually took from the University of Utah. They had developed this workshop, and then our team kind of went together and put together a presentation and a process. And this is building off of the work that I just discussed with Divya's team, with the US Ignite and the National Science Foundation. So this really kind of helped us springboard this workshop. And this is a workshop that we have available. Next slide, please. The other thing is that sometimes we have schools that want to see more of a longer term engagement, where what they're looking for is a project-based learning experience that kind of shows them really how do we take these abstract principles and really put them to play. How would data collection for them, rather than just looking at a spreadsheet, have the students actually collect the data and then analyze the data. So Divya and Whitney knows this is something we've been working on for quite some time to put together. There's always some challenges and hurdles along the way. But what we've now developed is utilizing we can use this with either Tetrahedra sensor or purple air sensor, is basically a project-based learning experience where we provide the sensor to the school and they have the opportunity to work with us on as many or as few classes as they would like. And we take the students through this process of learning about air pollution and public health. So some of the topics are like air pollution and health. We talk a lot about data analysis and developing citizen science projects, because if you're going to go through all this, what do you need to do to cite your monitor to make sure that if you take it to a regulatory agency, say, hey, I think there's a problem in this community. Well, you better be able to defend that data, and you better be able to show what are the steps that you took to make sure that the data you collected was not biased, that there were not any other areas that could have influenced the data. We need to see that the data was that these practices were put into place. So we talk a lot about that, and that's going through the quality assurance process, going through data analysis. How much data is representative? If I take 1 week's worth of data, is that enough to say that I have an air quality issue? It's probably not. You're going to need to see air quality data over the long term. So next slide, please. So for anybody who might be interested in it, so I know Divya just put out a survey. Feel free to contact our office. The staff member that's in charge of this, her name is Jen Seidel, and her contact information is on the screen. That's her playing with the Legos. Yes, that is a part of her job. She plays with Legos. But feel free to reach out to her and she'll be able to get you set up with a workshop if that's something that you would be interested in. And please note, this is for schools, but it's also for youth groups. If you have a Boy Scout group, a Girl Scout group, anything like that, we need about 2 hours of time for the short-term engagement. Or if you represent a high school or an ongoing group that wants to do a project-based learning experience, we can do that too. So feel free to reach out to her. When I'm switch it over to Whitney, I'll put her contact information in the chat function as well. And so then I'm just going to go ahead and, well, thank you, Patty, you're on it. I'm just going to go ahead and close and say that there's so much work has been done in the area of air quality, and so much from groups like Divya's group and Whitney's group and the work that she's going to talk about now. But we have also come a long way. So Patty, if you want to just kind of quickly, I don't need you to stop on any of the slides, but air quality has drastically improved over the years, but that doesn't mean that our work is done. That means that we still have a lot of work to do, and we need to keep proceeding with it. Patty, real quick, can you just click through the last few slides that I have on there? There we go. So there's just a few examples. Air quality used to look a lot different within the city of Cleveland. It has transformed since the 1970 since the 1970 amendment to the Clean Air Act. There's been a significant reduction in all the criteria air pollutants. But again, we still have some more work to do. I know I just saw that Administrator Regan is looking at PFAS. These are forever chemicals. So that's something else that's going to be on the horizon. So just because we've made progress, that doesn't mean that we stop now, and we need to just keep going. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Whitney Long-Jones, who's going to talk a little bit more about specific work that's going on in the Ohio City area.
All right. Thanks, Christina. And Divya, I'll give Patty a second to pull up my slide presentation. This is absolutely right. There's so much to do. Things may have gotten better, but we're still dealing with concentrated levels of poor air qualities in specific neighborhoods. So I'm going to talk a little bit. Again, just introduce myself really quickly. Whitney Long-Jones with Ohio City Incorporated, the Director of Community Engagement. And just talking a little bit about the Lakeview Air Quality Initiative called Let's Clear the Air that we are currently beginning to implement in Ohio City. Next slide. So little information about Ohio City Incorporated. I'll let you read the mission, but generally it is what the organization does is work with residents in the community, stakeholders, businesses, other social service agencies to do our best to make sure that everyone has the best quality of life that we can possibly help to provide. So there are just under 10,000 residents in Ohio City, very diverse in every single way that you can think of. But here's the racial mix-up: 50% white, 34% Black, 23% Hispanic, and 3% Native Asian and mixed race. And unfortunately, 37% of these residents are living below the poverty line. Next slide. So switching over to also give a little bit of information about Lakeview. It's one of two Cuyahoga Metropolitan Housing Authorities in Ohio City, and it's a population of about 1,400. Also, less diversity here. And if anyone's ever heard of Lakeview Terrace and Lakeview Tower, those two locations together make up Lakeview Estates. So I may refer to it as Lakeview Terrace or Lakeview Estates. So just so you know what I'm referring to if I'm using those names interchangeably. So this was established in the 1930s, and the Cleveland Memorial Shoreway, which also adds to the poor air quality in the neighborhood, was built in the early 1940s, and then local industries opened up in the 60s. So Divya was mentioning the historical disinvestment, and this is one of those areas in Cleveland. I mean, we see it all over the country, communities that are dealing with economic drivers in cities that other parts of the city will not allow to have in their neighborhoods. So when we're thinking highways break up those communities. Highways also increase traffic. So we're dealing with fuel emissions. And then we also have local industries that are built in close proximity of where people are living. And in this situation, some of the industries are adding to the particulate matter that residents are experiencing in the air on a daily basis. Next slide. So when I started in 2017 with Ohio City Inc., number one thing I wanted to do was work on the air quality project. So we know that this has been going on for decades now, and some of the staff there had really started to work with residents and do what they could to address this issue. But for me, it's definitely become a priority. And as you build relationships with individuals, you speak to them, you get to know them personally, and you find out like what's going on with them, with their families, with their friends, you know, babies being born with particulate matter in their lungs, people developing asthma and respiratory issues once they move into the Lakeview area that they had never experienced before. So after talking to quite a few residents in the first few months of me starting with OCI, that's Ohio City Inc., we said, hey, let's pull some folks together. Let's really start to bring awareness to this. Let's get more perspective on how you're living and what resources OCI has that we can make connections to so that we can support this process and mitigating this poor air quality. So in 2018, here are some of the activities that we did, the air quality public meeting. And if you can see on the bottom picture, Christina is standing to the far left and representing the Department of Public Health, was able to bring in some really good information and let people know who to contact, how to contact them, what to look out for, so that we can really start to give tools to residents and empower them to start doing what they need to do to make their community better. So we facilitated a community cleanup, and with the community cleanup, we talked more about environmental education, you know, the importance of engaging with nature and how green trees and just green vegetation also helps pull some of the toxins out of the air. So we just continue speaking with individuals about their experiences through focus groups and smaller group discussions. Next slide. So in 2019, we continued this work. You engaged the youth. Christina was bringing up the air quality projects that they're doing in the schools, which I think is amazing. So engaging the youth, inspiring the youth to become more involved in a fun way, but then also making sure that there's some productivity on the back end of it. So what we did was through our environmental education, we took students outside on the trails in the area, so the Cleveland Metro Parks, the bike path, and did a couple of placemaking projects where we saw, well, one thing we did is when we took the students bike riding, the children bike riding, they let us know that we don't have anywhere to put our bikes. You know, our bikes might get stolen if we leave them outside. We want to go to the community center, and we have to take our bikes into the community center at Lakeview. And fortunately, the manager at the community center loves the children, so he lets them bring their bikes inside and puts them in a room until they're ready to leave. So we said, hey, maybe there's an opportunity to build some bike racks. So making this also another fun and engaged initiative, had the youth design their own bike racks. And we worked with one of our partners who also designs a lot of the bike racks you'll see around Ohio City to put a couple at the community center. So now the youth have somewhere to lock their bikes up outside. We did a basketball court mural design, and this is working with Trust for Public Land. Oh, thanks, Patty. The bike rack installation, and that's generally what we did in 2019. So next slide. So Christina was also bringing this up. We understand that, and we kind of had to redirect what we were doing and just look at how to provide more resources during COVID, because the pandemic has really exacerbated and brought more to the forefront the disparities that people are experiencing now. So during this, a little bit of downtime from the air quality work that we're working on, we had an opportunity to really talk within the organization and say, how can we make sure that the work that we are doing is JEDI based, JEDI standing for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So racial equity and inclusion policy was made for staff to base our work on and inform how we connect with residents, the partnerships that we develop, and the programs that we implement. And also a JEDI framework to make sure that we're sticking to that policy so that it doesn't become a piece of paper sitting on the shelf and collecting dust. So one of the things that came out of that is, as we're working on the Irish Town Bend Park project, for anyone who's unfamiliar with that, it's the really large piece of land along West 25th Street between Bridge and Detroit, going down to the riverbank in the flats near Merwin's Wharf, the Cleveland Metro Parks restaurant, and working on stabilizing that hillside that's falling in. So this isn't what this is about, but that's a really important aspect of how we were implementing the racial equity and inclusion policy and the JEDI framework. We reached out to some Riverview residents because that's pretty much their backyard. Riverview is another CMHA housing unit in Ohio City, and are paying them as our ambassadors, are asking them to help us lead this process, and have really taken the engagement to another level to ensure diverse participation. And just so everybody knows, we are always looking for additional folks to be a part of our JEDI network that has also come out of our REI policy. So we'll have information on that if anyone is interested in signing up for text messages and just being in the loop on the work that we're doing in Ohio City, and also becoming involved if you like. Next slide. So as we have got a better handle on how we're moving through the pandemic, we started to pick up our air quality work again in this year. And some of the goals of Let's Clear the Air. So I want to explain that title really quickly because it has multiple meanings. So Let's Clear the Air is the obvious one, the poor air quality. Let's really talk about how we can make that better. But then it's also bringing a vast array of partners together, including the industries in the area, including the subject matter experts, the residents, social service agencies, to begin a discussion, to begin a conversation, a dialogue. What is it that we can all provide? Are there ways that we can all benefit from this? So let's clear the air. There's a little bit of contention when it comes to this topic, because we know that our industries are economic drivers. So when we are speaking about these organizations, we have to be careful because they are still partners. They are still politically connected in the way that we want to maintain those relationships and not really push anyone away, but still address the issue at hand. So we are, some of our goals are, like I mentioned earlier, collaborating with all of these individuals, bringing everyone to the table. And another goal is to conduct a real estate feasibility study. Maybe we can relocate the industry that's in the area. We want to monitor the air quality so that we can gather that data and analyze it, and also compare it to other cities in the area so that we have a baseline to work from. We want to develop another champion committee, just like we're doing for the Irish Town Bend Park project, and ask the residents to lead this process. And they're the ones living this every single day. So gaining their experience, understanding their experience, and speaking to them about what's going on and how we can best address and get other residents involved as well. So developing a committee and paying champions for their time so that they understand we appreciate everything that they're sharing with us and how they're working with us. So again, working with the local industries and identifying a solution that benefits everyone, and then also creating a sustainable model that can be utilized in other communities as well. Because we know Cleveland, we know Lakeview Estates is not the only one experiencing this. The history of this country has shared that with us by community disinvestment, by redlining, and so many other things. So whatever we pull from this project, we definitely want to be able to share with others, and also learn from communities that have done the work before us. Next slide. So that is pretty much what we're working on. We are picking this project back up, as I was saying, this year, right now, and we're working with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. Divya is one of our partners. Christina Yoka at the Department of Public Health is one of our partners as well. So working with a team of about 20 or so far to really talk about how to address this and make quality of life better for folks who deserve it. So information on the JEDI network, thank you, Patty, will be going out through text message. And, you know, we use text message to be inclusive as well. You know, a lot of people have cell phones, less people have internet, less people have laptops. So this is one way that we reach out to individuals that want to stay in touch with us. So that is all that I have on this project. And as of right now, it's going to be a 2-year project. You know, we're applying for funding. And as of right now, the framework is meeting with our stakeholders and partners on a bi-monthly basis to provide updates and get ideas on how we can really make this work, make this successful. So I'm going to pass it back to Patty.
All right, thanks, ladies. At this time, I'd like to open it up for just an open panel discussion. Not too many questions in the chat, but if you do have any, please post them in. We still have 12 more minutes left in the session, but I will start it off with a question from Norm Schmidt, who asks, many days prior and days after the 4th of July are a horror show for air quality. Is there anything being done about that?
Christina, you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, Norm, you're absolutely right that we do tend to see exceedances right around 4th of July, because there are people are setting off personal fireworks. There's the community level fireworks. And we see a lot of exceedances, or if it's not an exceedance of a standard, it's going to still be higher and elevated levels of air pollution. In terms of any steps or actions that are being done right now as it relates to fireworks and air quality, I am not aware of anything specific that's being done. This kind of gets into the area of like, so if it's personal fireworks, technically within the state of Ohio, you're not allowed to set off fireworks. So there is technically that legislation, even though you're able to purchase them. So I don't personally know what the best way is to address that. But I would agree with you that it is a problem, and that we do see some other, very bad air quality especially on 4th of July. So I'm sorry, I don't really have a better answer for that. But I would say again, technically for individual fireworks, you're not allowed to set them off in the state of Ohio. I don't know if either Divya or Whitney have anything else to add or suggest to that.
Okay, thank you, Christina. So Bruce Missick shares an interesting point. The state of New York in their school systems have a very strict program for air quality in the schools and the outside air quality. And I think that brings up a great point that, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's great programs going on that maybe we can adopt and, change to fit Cleveland's needs. Ladies, if you want to jump in and share any thoughts on that.
I think I don't offhand, I don't know the specifics of the legislation that they have within New York, but I do believe that idle reduction is one thing that they are pretty strong about. So these are going to be the school pickup lines that are outside of the schools. So I'm pretty sure that they have a pretty strong program around vehicle idling. I also want to say, if I'm remembering correctly, I can't remember if it was the state or if it was the city had implemented a citizen enforcement component to the idle reduction program, where they were engaging citizens to take a picture of heavy duty vehicles that were idling and take a video. and then submit that to their agency, and then they were able to then follow up on those complaints. So they do have, a couple things in place, but from what I recall, it's related to vehicle idling as being one of the primary focuses.
Use.
I just want to jump on the thought about vehicle idling. One of the things that as we sort of develop policy, I just want to, put on the radar as we all think about this in the programs that we develop. How do the policies that we develop rank on the real equity toolkit if we really run one? Some of them in some neighborhoods, because of the disinvestment, because of the standard, because of their vehicles might be older vehicles do emit higher particulate matter or higher emissions. How do we ensure that when we say no idling, that we are providing all the other wraparounds before we take off something for them? Because at the end of it, we're then penalizing someone for something that's not in their control, and for somebody else having caused a cumulative burden on the air, somebody else is paying for it. So just as we sort of do these things, how do we think about that? I'll just go back to that point and leave it there.
Thank you, Divya. One more question popped up in the chat from Connor McGuire. How has the poor air quality in the greater Cleveland area affected wildlife, especially in the metro parks? This would be a great time to have someone from Metro Parks present.
I think that is.
I can't speak to that. I haven't received too much information on that. But I do want to kind of go back to what Divya was saying a moment ago. It really does boil down to policy. What kind of chemicals are even allowed to be put on items that go in your home. We're dealing with countries, Eastern European countries that have banned so many chemicals that the United States is really, really far behind on. So it really boils down to policy, and that means, voting locally, voting regionally. So we have to get out there and make our voices heard. I think that's a great question. There are things that should not be allowed in our home that are completely legal.
On that note, I just want to piggyback on what you just said too, Whitney, is going back to what California just did last week. They banned the use of gas-powered lawn equipment. If you look at it, gas-powered lawn equipment, when we begin to use them on very poor air quality days, when we do that in schools where we have large lawns, on days that we think looks great for us to do that, we're actually adding much more to them. Vulnerable populations children are paying much more. So how do we begin to, when we transition, make that clean transition? Plant your wildscapes so you mow less, and when you mow, use alternate methods.
That's a great point, Divya. Okay, so we have a question from Jefferson Jones. Air quality, or lack of it, seems to be a hidden danger to all of our health. What plans are in place to bring air quality more vivid to Northeast Ohio residents? And let me just say that this session is a great example of some of the good work going on, but I will turn it over to you.
So I think that that's a wonderful point, is that there is a lack of awareness, and people don't know, like ozone, you can't see ozone. So if it is an issue and it's impacting your health, it's an invisible gas, you can't see it. So how do you even know that it's a bad ozone day? Or particulate matter, like if there's a high levels of particulate matter, or just general air quality in general. We have started implementing, we are building a strategy for better communication to the community about this. So again, I'm within the city of Cleveland, and part of this is through the establishment of our team. Is that prior to 2018, the Cleveland Division of Air Quality didn't have staff that were specifically focused on community engagement. And so since our team was established, developing these partnerships with important people like Divya, Whitney, the other CDCs that are in the community, so that we can learn more about what are the specific problems in a community, but then also speak to the community members. So, I mean, everything that, between, doing the work that we are trying to do with the youth, trying to get students at an early age, going out to public health meetings. Now, I mean, again, we did have to, due to COVID precautions, the past year and a half, we've been doing more of this type of work. But just going out to public health meetings, going out to community events, and doing what we can to talk to people. There's also an important tool called the Air Quality Index. And so the Air Quality Index, it's basically a measurement of how good or bad the air quality is that day. If you have a cell phone, you probably get the notification, or you can download an app to get the notification of what the AQI is that day. We have a hotline so that if you don't have internet or you don't have a smartphone, you can call our hotline every day to see what the projected AQI is. So we do have these steps in place that we're trying to get the word out and get more information to the community about about air quality and what's going on in the neighborhoods.
Thanks, Christina. This next question kind of piggybacks on that one from Alethea Watson. Has the City of Cleveland been working to implement any policies that address improving air quality and wellness at a level such as the City of Cleveland Sustainable Municipal Building Policy?
I'm not too familiar with the municipal building policies. I can't really speak to that. But I know one of the points that Divya had made earlier was this work around the cumulative impact ordinance. And this is something that we have been trying to understand and develop. Like, is there a way that we can adopt a similar ordinance here where it looks at all of the different factors that are contributing to a community's poor health? So that would be air, water, all the mediums, and what type of ordinance could be adopted. We are working to implement even changes in our policy and our behavior. So like within like the air quality for point sources of air pollution facilities, one of the things that we're looking at is how do we take the neighborhoods that either based off of different environmental justice indices or specific air quality data, can we change our enforcement practices? So this would be the development of like inspection schedules of facilities based off of what is happening in the community.
To be
Great,
the
thank you.
culmination
We
of our
are
efforts,
nearing the
and
end
I
of
think
our
we're really
session
just
here.
trying to
Any
those,
closing
on the
remarks,
ground and
ladies?
be able to implement them in our
Yeah, I just want to address Norm's comment. The Ohio City demographics don't add up to 100%. You are absolutely right. It should be 14 or 13 instead of 23 for the Latinx community. Thank you for pointing that out.
focus on
Good
circular
catch.
economy
Thank you.
with trees and green spaces, which has, of course, a lot of connections.
I
that
want to
I think will
invite here
lead
anybody that's
after
community
this
member with the CDC or an anchor institution, nonprofit anchor institution, to explore the Greenlink Analytics tool. If you are a nonprofit under a certain operating budget, you have until the end of the year free access to understanding Cleveland's data. We're one of 50 cities across the country to have access to this data. It talks about asthma, it talks about eviction, housing. The indices touch the digital divide. And most importantly, this was designed around our just energy transition and how this can help us visualize both energy efficiency and clean measure tools. But you can look at them, if you look at it in a collective angle, see how one influences the other. I think this is another tool in your kit. I just want to invite everybody to check this out. It's Greenlink Analytics. I just dropped that link on your and I also want to thank everybody for listening here.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you, attendees. Thank you, presenters, Christina, Divya, and Whitney. This was just as amazing as I knew it would be. Post-summit, in the next week or so, we will have all the sessions compiled, including this recording and all the resources that you see in the chat. Everything will be compiled into separate PDFs. So be on the lookout for that. With that, I will close out this session. we have a few minutes until our next session's at 2:15. So I encourage you to jump into the networking, meet some new people, make a new friend, and stay tuned. Thank you all.
Thank you.